That evening, I was talking to my husband on the phone, and he told me that a friend of ours had a tremendous trauma in their life. Our friend's ex-wife had taken their 7-year-old son, thrown him off of a hotel balcony, and then she jumped. Now, that is traumatic news, even if you don't know the people involved. I was shocked, saddened, beside myself. My husband and I were both very emotional. We hung up and I tried to go to bed and I couldn't sleep. Every time I tried to shut my eyes, I could feel the desperation of that young boy. I felt such conflict from the mother that had perpetrated this act, right? So I was just thrashing around, and about 3 a.m., I literally sat up in my hotel bed and said out loud, I know I can't do anything about this, but how am I supposed to be with this? That's when I heard the voice again. Be love. Greet everyone with an open heart without an agenda.
I'm honored to welcome Diane Haworth, a visionary leader and founder of the Be Love Principles. Her journey is nothing short of extraordinary, with a BS in mass communications and an MBA and decades of experience in marketing across government, private and non-profit sectors. Diane shifted her focus to her true calling, helping others connect with their divine wisdom. She's a lifelong student of A Course in Miracles, the Enneagram and metaphysical teachings. Diane brings a unique blend of mysticism, practicality and heart to everything she does. She's a certified coach in numerous healing modalities, a speaker, a TV host, and the author of the insightful and witty book, How to Choose Love When You Just Want to Slap Somebody. Love it. Diane's work includes the profound Be Love Principles, which has transformed countless lives by teaching how to shift from ego-driven fears to divine love. Diane is here to guide us through her journey, the mystical moment that birthed the Be Love Principles, and how we can incorporate them into our lives. Diane, welcome to the Transcenders podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to share the Be Love Principles and to talk with you and interact with people who are interested in this kind of topic. How wonderful is that?
Absolutely. Your journey has been rich with transformation, learning and alignment, from growing up in a small town in Virginia to becoming an internationally recognized leader in love-centered living. Can you tell us more about the early influences in your life and how they shaped your path?
Well, yes. And now, as I'm sitting where I am in life as a grandmother and a senior, I can tell you those transformational experiences did not seem so at the time. They seemed like hard work. They seemed like a challenge, and life just seemed very hard. It's only in retrospect I can see that for me, it was the hand of love at work, giving me invitations to see and assess how I wanted to be in my life. I grew up in a very small town in Virginia, as you mentioned, about an hour southwest of Washington, D.C. So it was really interesting because we had a power city an hour away, but we were a very small, at that time, rural community where everybody knew each other, but we did not have resources that you would have in a city. There, we had a little library, but back then there was no internet. It wasn't anything like it is today. So you learn things through experience and through interacting with people. And my parents and my parents' generation had been through World War II. So they knew hardship and loss and grief and rebuilding. And that's kind of the foundation that I grew up with.
Growing up, you were taught to be good, you were taught to be nice, you were taught to be quiet, but not to be love.
Yeah.
So when did you first recognize the need to explore divine love?
That's a great question. I think, like a lot of women in my generation, it was you're to be seen and not heard, be a good girl, be a good daughter, be a good wife, do what you're supposed to, listen to your boss, all of those sorts of things, which was just what we did in the time, right? That was just the environment I grew up with. It wasn't until the 70s when I was in college when the women's movement here took off, and we were free to question things. Now, a lot of people always have a questioning mind. I was always curious, but I like to say I was curious within boundaries. I was curious within boundaries. And as I started going to church, having kids, reading books, going to classes, I kept thinking, I missed something. There was a letter that everybody got but me. What is it that is not quite complete in my life? What I realized eventually was the more I looked externally for validation, for love, for purpose, I had wonderful experiences and met lots of people, but there was still a void. It wasn't until I learned to meditate, which was 30 years ago now, and could connect to that voice within, that I realized was the thread of love I had been looking for my whole life. That was where wisdom, comfort, guidance could come from. I'm one of those people that is always having multiple voices in her head, right? Like, we should do that. Don't do that. What if you do this? That was very loud, very loud. I was a very fearful child. I grew up during the Vietnam War era. That was before there were safeguards on what was shown on TV. So I walk through the living room, my dad's watching TV, and I'm seeing little kids. That's what we saw. So of course I was terrified. When I could, through meditation, connect to that voice within that was quieter, that was steady, that was non-judgmental, that is when everything changed for me. And I realized that that was not only accessible to me, right? It was accessible to everyone. But that was a huge turning point in my life, just learning to meditate and becoming quiet. I didn't have a lot of quiet in my life. Within my own head, I didn't have a lot of quiet. This was really revolutionary for me and for people like me.
Was there a series of any other experiences besides meditation that served as a turning point in your spiritual awakening?
When I look back from where I am now in my late 60s, I realized that when I gave birth to my first child, a daughter, 40 years ago now, I had what I now know was a near-death experience. We didn't know anything about that. There wasn't podcasts or TV shows about it. This was in the mid 80s. And from the time I had that experience where I went through the light, went to this place where I felt nothing but acceptance, love, it was wonderful. It turned out it wasn't my time, right? I came back, but I have never, ever feared love since then. I also never doubted that we are all part of something way bigger than our physical bodies. That was a big turning point. That opened that door to what I would call not religious, but mystical curiosity. What's beyond the physical? Like, I know what's in the books, at least the books I had access to at the time. I know what they teach us at church, and I grew up in a lovely church that was very loving and supportive. There was just still that piece missing. And for me, it was that divine interconnection, which, interestingly enough, meditation was introduced to me by the minister we had in the 90s, which was radical for a little Presbyterian church, actually. But it changed everything for me.
You had a professional background in marketing and communications. How did that prepare you to share these deeply personal and universal truths with the world?
Communicating, storytelling, sharing information with people is just something that I've always really loved to do. I remember being little, I mean, like on the playground little, in grade school, and kids coming up to me and saying, I need to find out about this. Who should I ask? Oh, you need to go ask this teacher or that friend. I've always been a connector. I love to connect people, resources. If I was in a marketing role, product services that I believed in, but it was always in service. How can I help live more loving, happy, fulfilled life? Rather, it was with a service that I was promoting at the time or with anything else. It just was always fun for me. Fun for me to share information. You can see I love to talk about this stuff. And as far as the communications degree, I laugh about that now because when I got my original undergraduate degree in communications, it was nothing like what we have now. But what it did teach me was that on the horizon will always be communication modalities, avenues that I can't even see now. I can't even see them now. But I can know that behind the scenes, there are always going to be these opportunities to share and connect. Now, I guarantee you, when I was in school originally, there was nothing like Zoom or Skype or anything like that. But because I felt so passionately about connection, I knew that there would always be a way for people to be able to connect to each other, to help each other, to love each other through whatever we were going through. And to me, that's really exciting.
And what role has being the weird one in the family played in your growth and perspective?
I've always been the weird one, but not as a judgment, but just to share information. My family, traditionally, my parents were very oriented where something's wrong, you go to the doctor, you take medicine, you do whatever you got to do. That's just what you did. I certainly will go to a physician if I need to, but 40, 50 years ago, I was trying to go to a library and research. Well, if this is an issue, what vitamins, what foods might support healing? They thought I was nuts. So one of the things that happened was I got used to not having the same focus as anybody else and being okay with it. Just being okay with being the
Mm.
weird one. But what was really funny is how my family would quietly, if we were at an event, a Christmas dinner or something, somebody would quietly take me to a corner and say, that stuff, that energy work you're doing, how would that work with this? Like, so it's just funny. Even now, I got a text not too long ago from someone in my family that said, that energy vibration thing about, can you put it on this? It's just been funny to me to see people's perspectives change and morph and become more accepting of certain things, like energy work, like the energy of our thoughts, the vibration of love. And we all know, right? You feel physically different when you're angry, upset, overwhelmed. That physically feels different in your body than when you're happy and you're joyful and you're having a carefree adventure. Who wouldn't want that?
Exactly. I think it was Tesla or Einstein said everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. Sometimes what happens is certain people bring about these new paradigms to liberate people who are prisoners of their past so that they can become pioneers of the future, which is what you're doing. You brought about a new way of thinking which has had that ripple effect. So that ripple effect has not just gone in one direction, it's gone in many directions because now people are coming back to you and saying, hey, you know that energy work you were talking about? I want to take you back to 2018. You had what you described as a direct divine download
Yep.
during meditation that gave birth to the Be Love principles. Can you take us back to that moment and describe what you experienced?
I will. And thank you for your kind words. I do want to also say, I just was trying to find answers to challenges in my own life, right? And I think there are thousands and thousands and probably millions of people just like me that are just trying to figure out how to have a happier and a more fulfilling life. That's what precipitated the experience I had with the Be Love principles, actually. I had been immersed in metaphysical studies. And for me, that was some of the mystics, certainly the mystical text of A Course in Miracles is something that once I left a traditional church, I was really very drawn to. I had begun to meditate with a specific focus. And it was when my journaling in the morning, I had a meditation practice and also a journaling practice where I would go into a meditative state and I would ask love. And to me, love is God, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call the intelligent, creative, expansive energy that beats your heart and mind, that makes the tides come in, that creates galaxies. To me, that's love. So I would say, love, what do you most want me to know today? And I had been doing that for, I don't know, a couple of years. And I would get a couple lines, maybe sometimes a paragraph, and it would be interesting guidance and things, but it wasn't necessarily earth shattering, but it was cool and it was consistent. And I had created this practice, which was really wonderful for me. About 6 months before I had this experience that we're going to talk about, I had been praying, show me how to serve. Show me how to be an instrument of your peace. That was my intention. So I went to a conference, a big conference actually, in May 2019, or 2018 rather, it was May 19th. And I was seated in a big conference room There's probably at least 200, maybe a little more than 200 people there. And I was in Toronto, so I wasn't even in the United States. International group. And the facilitator, Robert Holden, who is a wonderful author and a mentor of mine, he was facilitating this, and he had us go into a meditative state as a group. We were paired up, and to imagine we were seated on a foundation of love. And we were to internally ask ourselves from that loving place, what do you most want me to know today? Now, I have to say, to be totally honest, I thought, I've been doing this for years. This will be easy. And that was my ego. That was my arrogance, because I was not prepared. I was not prepared for what happened. Immediately, I was transported. It was like I was watching a movie of myself. I was the observer. As I said, right, in that state, love, what do you most want me to know today? I heard, be love. I heard the voice, be love. Then I saw myself walking up the front stairs of my now adult daughter's house. And I could see she had a big glass door at the time at the front door. And her son, my grandson, who was about 15 months old at the time, he was on the other side of the door. And remember, I'm observing this. I see him and he sees me. And from my place as the observer, I could see the energy of love going from my heart to his. I could see it. And I heard, greet everyone with an open heart without an agenda. The next second in this movie I'm observing, I am inside the front door and I'm seeing my little grandson, who is adorable. But instead of seeing his form, I am seeing this iridescent energy in his chest, in his heart area. And I hear the voice again. And it says, see the divine essence in everyone and everything. Next second, it's like a scene in a movie. I am in the family room and it's just my grandson and I. Again, he's 15 months old. We're playing blocks and he goes to toss a block to me and he hits me in the cheek. I think he's just a kid. He doesn't know how to throw anything. I mean, he's not that great at it. That's when I heard the voice again that said, forgive quickly, completely, and unconditionally. The next second, I am in a darkened room and it's dark. I can barely make out a door frame and the door starts to come open and out pours this teeming, vibrant light. It is sparkling with energy. Now, when I had my near-death experience, my experience of the light was warm, encompassing, comforting. This light was vibrant. This is like what I would expect it would be like in New Orleans during Mardi Gras. I've never been there, but this was like party energy. This was jubilation and joy. And it was overwhelming, to tell you the truth. I started to have tears like it was too much. And I heard, you don't understand. You're all trying to get back here. You never left. You are the light. You are the light of the all. Just like that, it was over. And my life has never been the same since that. Those four statements over a period of time, I started to call the Be Love principles. And that is what is my passion to share and teach. And I appreciate so much being able to share that with your folks here.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's incredible. I'm really curious to know, was there a question or was there a longing that led you to ask love, what do you most want me to know today?
It was actually the instruction from Robert. Like, this was a class exercise. Again, I thought, this is a piece of cake. Like, I know I do this every morning in my journaling. This won't be a big deal. Totally my ego at play. But what I think in retrospect is the years of meditation, the years of opening, doing my best to connect to my heart, and asking for those months prior, show me how to serve. It was like, okay, here's what you get. I do have to say, I don't think these principles in other forms appear in all kinds of literature. My personal belief, at least right now, is this is what I needed to make those next steps in my own life. I needed to understand how to be love in the world. I needed to understand how to go through each of those steps, certainly the forgiveness piece. And this was a tool that I found not only transformational for me, but for the people that I teach it to and work with as a coach.
The Be Love message you received, how does
Yeah.
that differ from other spiritual insights you may have had?
For me, it was very succinct. I'm very much a process person. So if you and I are working on a project, then I just want you to give me a list. What's my tasks? Give me my list. Let me tick them off. Okay, now I know that's my personality. Okay, now I know I've got this. So for me, when I think that I had a desire to be loved, what does that mean? So for me, this was a real process that helped me learn to be more loving to myself and others in the world, but reminded me that we all come from that same light and we're all part of that light and are here to shine that light for each other. So it was the process part that was really magical for me.
How did you move from receiving this divine download to developing the Be Love principles as a system for transformation?
It was a arduous process, and I will tell you the next part of the story, and I tell people that there are some disturbing parts in this next section of the story.
Tell us about the challenges you faced in sharing this.
As this event occurred, right in the middle of a class, a 2-day conference, to say that I was disheveled is an understatement. My body had received a physical shock. I was disoriented. I literally thought somebody had spiked my coffee. I was in a big conference. There were thousands of people at this conference. I didn't know what to think. So I was confused. I did go through the day, went to dinner with my friends. I had started to feel a little scratchy in my throat and just thought, it was an overwhelming day. But that evening, I was talking to my husband on the phone, and he told me that a friend of ours had a tremendous trauma in their life. Our friend's ex-wife had taken their 7-year-old son, thrown him off of a hotel balcony, and then she jumped. Now, that is traumatic news, even if you don't know the people involved. I was shocked, saddened, beside myself. My husband and I were both very emotional. We hung up and I tried to go to bed and I couldn't sleep. Every time I tried to shut my eyes, I could just feel the desperation of that young boy. I felt such conflict from the mother that had perpetrated this act, right? So I was just thrashing around, and about 3 a.m., I literally sat up in my hotel bed and said out loud, I know I can't do anything about this, but how am I supposed to be with this? And that's when I heard the voice again. Be love. Greet everyone with an open heart without an agenda. See the divine essence in everyone and everything. Forgive quickly, completely, and unconditionally. And remember, you never left the light. You never left the light. So at that point, at 3 a.m., after that day I'd had, I started using those principles with the mother that had done this. And as I started asking, how can I see her with an open heart without an agenda? I was led to move through that process. It wasn't that I wish this hadn't happened. This is not about guilt, what's right or wrong. This is about going from my stressed human perspective and finding a divine perspective in this. And I found it did bring me comfort. I was able to fall asleep because I had to get up and go to class the next day. And when I awoke, I had lost my voice, completely gone, which I think meant I then had to process this internally. I couldn't call up my girlfriends and said, guess what happened? What do you think? This still had to be processed within me. That next week was a big undoing, as I really struggled with not only the news of what had happened to our friends, but what was my part in this principle thing? What even is this stuff? And what am I supposed to do with it? So eventually, what I was guided to do was to take each principle one a week and focus on that principle. So that first week, and I've got journals and all kinds of documentation about this, I thought, okay, everybody I see, I'm going to do my best to greet with an open heart without an agenda. That was not that easy. Can I tell you, that wasn't that easy. It was easy with people that I loved, like my grandson. I mean, that was super easy. But the guy that, cut me off in traffic, okay, how do I see him differently? Or the lady that was holding up the grocery line, how do I see her differently? The politician that I didn't agree with that I saw on TV, how could I see that person differently with an open heart, without an agenda, without my filters, without my judgment, without my human preconceived notion of what was right, wrong, or appropriate. And it really started to shift me. And I would do that with each one of those principles once a week. I did that several series. And then I started using them on myself. Took me a while to figure that out. But when I decided that I would look myself in the mirror every day as I woke up, how do I greet myself without an agenda? Without seeing gray hair, wrinkles, without seeing the drama and trauma in my past. Then I could start to see myself as a divine essence. And when you can see it in you, it sparkles everywhere. And I bet you've had that experience as well.
Thank you for sharing that story. I felt the trauma and tragedy of that, even though I don't know them. There's deep hurt there. And in listening to you, I can see the wounds you've encountered. You're not speaking from your wounds, you're speaking from your gifts. And I'd like to explore the Be Love principles with you. I know there are 4 statements that are designed to help shift from an ego-driven perspective to a divine one. The first principle, greet everyone with an open heart without an agenda. This principle feels both simple and profound, because what does it mean to greet someone with an open heart, and why is it important to release agendas in our interactions? How can we identify when we're holding on to hidden agendas in our relationships, and what practices or tools can help us cultivate an open-hearted approach to others?
That's a great question. I can just tell you the way it worked for me and the way that I share with clients. First of all, it comes with an intention, right? Intention and consistency. I can tell you it is super easy to identify when you are not open because there is a constriction in your body. You can feel it. And you can hear that little voice in your head. Well, she didn't mean this guy, not this guy. I can be open-hearted to everybody else, but this guy's a jerk. So this can't be what she's talking about with her Be Love principles. I assure you it is. Now, one of the things that I think helped me personally is I'm a student of A Course in Miracles. In the Course in Miracles, we talk about love or fear, right? Everything is love or a call for love. So when I could remember, which I didn't all the time, and I still don't all the time, but when I can remember that everything is love or a call for love, that will take off that judgmental edge for me, right? There's also something that it talks about in the Course as seeing versus vision. And I could really understand this because the Be Love principles came to me with the aid of my grandson, who wasn't physically there, but he was there in my vision. As a grandmother, all I see is the most adorable, gorgeous, brilliant child that has ever walked the earth. That is love responding to love. That's what that is. Other people could see the same kid that I see, the really good kid, but he's a kid. You know, he's 2 years old. He would have a tantrum because he was 2 years old. I would see that child I love so much, where somebody else might think, oh, what a little spoiled brat. Why is he having a tantrum? We always see through our own perceptions. So what the Be Love principles do, and this is because this was the end result I wanted, helps move me to what we would call the vision, right? The holy vision, the divine vision, where you can see the essence of someone. I do want to say, especially when we get talking about forgiveness, this doesn't mean you don't have boundaries, right? This doesn't mean we don't have human, healthy boundaries and behaviors. If there is someone who has perpetrated some act and there needs to be legal action, go take legal action, right? Go do what you have to do to protect yourself, your property, whatever it is. What the principles have helped me understand, and the years of study in the Course, is someone's ego or their personality can do an act, say something that hurts me in some way, but the essence of who they are is love. We all can choose to act from that essence or love or not. That's like the whole human thing. Did that answer your question?
We see what we teach ourselves to see, or what we've allowed ourselves to be taught to see. And the whole thing of personality and essence is we are conditioned to have this personality, but actually there is an essence, life inside each one of us. Because no one's got your DNA, no one's got your fingerprint. There's a uniqueness about the essence of Diane. And you can see this in Native American culture where they don't name their kids, at least they never used to, until they amplified a particular essence. So I believe Sitting Bull was called Sitting Bull because he amplified defiance and stubbornness. So that was the essence of Sitting Bull, as distinct from my grandfather's called John or Bob, and so we'll call him John Bob. There's a different lens to look through when we're looking at the human and looking at their divine essence. Within society, if you conform to a particular persuasion, then you get confirmed because
Yeah.
you've conformed. But when you look at the divine essence in the human, what is that amplifying? Each person, each individual has a unique essence. Love is at the foundation of it all. Do you have a story where this particular principle created or cultivated a breakthrough in someone's life?
The second principle,
The
is that
first
what you
one.
mean? The first one. Oh, in almost everybody who's ever used it, it has shifted perspective. And I love that you bring up the cultural aspect and the naming, because even today, people will assume things about someone just when they read their name, especially if it's from a different culture or an ethnic group. That has nothing to do with who that person is. Understanding that all of this is labeled, and sometimes it's labeled for convenience, right? You and I have emailed back and forth because we had labels and email addresses. So that part's pretty convenient. And because we talked before, I know that you and I understand, and I'm sure people who are attracted to your wonderful show. One of the things that happened, which I personally thought this was really funny, at the end of 2019, I was guided to do a case study on the Be Love principles. My first thought was, I'm not going to do that. I don't have time for that. That's not in my Q1 plan for 2020. I'm not doing it. And I kept hearing over and over, do a case study, do a case study. I hadn't done a case study since I did my MBA. I had to even remind myself what a case study was. But I was given a series of 8 traits, I guess you would call them. And I developed, or I was given, I should say, like a survey form where I invited people into this case study. I had a very small case study, and they would rate themselves how they felt on things like clarity and self-love and peace and connection to spirit, things like that. There was only 8 of them. I had them complete this survey at the beginning, and we started in January 2020. So you might know where I'm going with this. And then every week for 3 months, every week they would send me these forms and they would rate all these things. And everybody could have the experience of sending notes about any of these things they wanted to. And I had one lady who was just really wonderful, beautiful writer. In the beginning, in January, she was also in the medical field. So everybody remembers what was going on in 2020 in medicine. In the beginning, I would get these, I mean, half-page notes. These people are stupid. I can't believe I work with these idiots. They're not doing what they should do. You know, we got to get ready for this thing. She was very raw and very real. As she worked through the principles, within 3 months, I started seeing a turn probably in the second month, which, if you remember, meant that hysteria was ramping up toward COVID. And she's in the medical professional, so it was worse for her, right, than probably most people. I started seeing in her comments things like, these people aren't so bad. I think somebody's turned a corner. And by the end of it, she was like, I love the people I work with. They're all doing the best they can. This is wonderful and working towards a common good. And yes, we're under a lot of stress, but we can bring love to everything. Now, this is someone who was working with the same people she identified as idiots 90 days earlier. Same people who were more stressed, more everything. So I saw this process in real time, and I have data on it. And it was amazing what came out of that study, which I never would have done. Yeah, I never would have done it. I wouldn't have had this information. But that's what happened when I followed guidance that I didn't want to follow. I want to be real clear about that. I don't want to mislead anybody. It's not like I go, oh, that's my guidance, I'm going to do it. No, I talk back like everybody else does.
It would be interesting to do clinical studies on these principles. These principles are Simple, but they're profound.
Well, it will go into a book, I'll tell you that much. One of
Mm.
the most interesting things in that little study I did, I had people from aged, I think, 37 to probably 70s, early 70s. Some retired, some working. Some had adult parents who were in nursing homes they were very worried about. Some people had their own health conditions they were concerned about. Some people had little kids that were, oh my gosh, going to be home for goodness knows how long. What was so interesting was, as a group, over the course of these 3 months, when I looked at the data, their self-love increased. I have it right here, actually, by 14%. Their sense of peace. Now, you remember how crazy we all were because we didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew what was going on. Their sense of peace increased as a group by 17%. Their feelings of divine connection increased by 29%. And the statistic that still just blows me out of the water, and I redid this, I don't know how many times because I thought I got it wrong. Every week I would ask them to rate their clarity. How clear do you feel about who you are, what you're here to do, and how clear you are about your life? Their sense of clarity after using the principles for at least 5 days out of a 7-day week for 3 months increased by 60% as a group. That's incredible.
Which tells me this data that's being generated contribute to establishing peaceful chemistry. And peaceful chemistry enables and empowers one to have peace of mind.
Oh, that is a beautiful phrase, peaceful chemistry. That's exactly right. Because I had people all over the world that had to make difficult decisions. What
Mm.
I found was very normal people, just like you and me, like everybody that's ever going to hear this, who were in a very abnormal situation, having to make decisions about our lives, our families' lives, our extended families' lives, our businesses. I saw the people in my study be able to do that with more grace and ease than I saw in the general public.
But I have noticed in my mentoring practice, when they bring all those things to a standstill, the fear, the anxiety, they start to become much more serotonin induced, which is the neurotransmitter of inner peace. That generates peaceful chemistry, which by default contributes to peace of mind. Then they become much more free occupied as
Yep.
distinct from being preoccupied.
Beautiful way to say it.
Right.
And you and I know when that happens at the individual level, we know that energy spreads, that helps the family, that helps the community, that helps everything.
That's the
One of the
ripple effect.
That's the ripple effect. And one of the things that I think helped in this case, it certainly helped me personally going through COVID, what we all experienced, right? Was that fourth principle. You are the light, you never left the light of the all. If I can remember, I am not this, and those of us that have near death experiences, we know this isn't it. We know this is an experience that we're going through. And I don't ever, ever, ever want to negate real pain and suffering that occurs every moment of the day. My experience has been when I am most aligned to that divine within, instead of being swallowed up by the waves of life, it's more like I can ride the waves. Doesn't mean
Mm.
things don't happen, because they do. I am not riding a unicorn hopping over rainbows every day. It's not happening. Stuff happens in my life just like everybody else's. Having a connection to the divine truth, what I feel is the divine truth, what's come through me for my experience, everybody's got their own. That's been the difference between life being hard and a challenge and life being an adventure. When we go on an adventure, like this year is going to be an adventure, if it's anything like it's been this first month, you have fewer expectations, you have fewer attachments to outcome. What I find is by looking at life as an adventure, there's more of an ebb and flow. Sometimes, things happen on an adventure that are great and unexpected and they're wonderful surprises. Sometimes not so much, but I find it easier to navigate and to be flexible. First of all, when I'm remembering that outside of the persona that's Diane Haworth, I'm a divine soul, just like you are, just like everybody who'll ever hear this, that there seems to be more of an invitation from love for me to remember that regardless of what's going on, joy is present, love is present,
Mm.
compassion is present alongside any suffering that I might be going through, or my friends might be going through, or my country might be going through. Joy is still there. Joy is part of that essence of love, that vibration of love to me. That's why everybody loves those silly kitten and cat videos on YouTube, right? It's just essence of love, being curious and playful and happy. That's why we love to watch little kids, and a baby, anything is fun because there's that innocence. And love helps us remember our own innocence.
Each one of those animals, cats, dogs, they all have their unique essence.
Their love, love in fur
Their
form.
love, yeah. And they come to teach you that, even though their time is short here. I remember years and years ago when my family had a dog. That dog taught me joy, loyalty, love, no hidden agenda. But its life was short. It came here to teach me something. That's what I gleaned from it. And I want to touch on something that you mentioned earlier about not to negate pain, because there's a cultural resistance to the deep descent. We've created an architecture of avoidance where the swift fix replaces what I call the sacred descent. And there are key cultural barriers to this. As an example, there is the speed imperative. We live in a culture that values instant solutions, but the descent requires a very slow and uncomfortable gestation, whereas modern systems prioritize efficiency over depth, and quick fixes promise immediate relief without the messy work of transformation. You also have the comfort paradigm. We've pathologized suffering or necessary suffering, and we've medicalized normal human responses to loss and grief. So the marketing of comfort as the highest good is prevalent, but the avoidance of discomfort is seen as wisdom rather than defense. Everything, including healing, has become a commodity. Pills and programs and packages promise this transformation without the descent. You can't package it, you cannot predict it. There are no guaranteed outcomes, which means it's a hard sell. And at the cost of avoidance, without what I call the descent, because I always hear in spiritual circles the ascent. Yes, that is one aspect of it. But without the descent, we lose access to deeper resources, and we go into these superficial coping mechanisms that become brittle under real pressure. That shadow material accumulates, becomes unexplored, and we become increasingly fragile despite all of these solutions. That brings a loss of transformative capacity. So the ability to metabolize difficulty diminishes. We lose the muscle of psychological endurance, and transformation becomes feared rather than recognized as natural. So our capacity for rebirth atrophies.
Those are all really, really good points. One of the things that comes to mind for me is this idea of being in a darkened space. Let's just say you turn a light on in your living room after dark, and the middle of the room is lit and everything's great, but you don't know what's in the corners. I think that speaks to what you're talking about. We'll light the room, but we're not going to look at what's in the corner. We're not going to clean that stuff up because we don't need to look at it right now. There are
Yes.
many practices that help you sit with grief, sadness, trauma, and help you move through those in a way that is truly deeply healing, as opposed to superficially doing that. Now, I have to tell you the truth. When I got the principles and we got to that third one, right, the forgiveness one, if I could go somewhere and get a big old jar of forgiveness pills, I would be doing it. Like I would do it. Yeah, let's do that. That is false security. That's only taking the pain away for a few minutes or whatever it is. It is not addressing the real transformation you talked about. When you can get to a place where true forgiveness is available for you and whoever you have resentments toward or whatever that is, that release of that kind of energy, that is spent on resentment, regret, all of those things. That is where the transformation is. And that requires a shift in perspective. Maybe we have to take a spotlight and we got to look at the corners in the room. Where's there still dirt? Where are there some piles of stuff that we're not willing to look at? What I would offer is, while our human mind is afraid for whatever reason to go into those dark corners, love never is. Love is not afraid. I hear this sometimes, people, especially with romantic relationships, and we know that everything in our life is a relationship, right? Relation to our body, our health, our finances, each other. But they will say, oh, I used to be married and love hurt me. Love never hurt you. Somebody you were married to might have hurt you, but love never hurt you. Love is simply love. It's just love. It is all accepting. It's just love. The more love we can bring to the shadows, and if we can know, just like in our near-death experience, we know there is this energy that is loving and supporting us, that we can take with us into those dark corners. That's where a lot of that transformation can occur. That's been my experience. And for me, the working through the Be Love principles as a process has been a tool that's helped me. Thankfully, there are many, many tools in many different types of mystical studies and even in religious settings. And thank goodness, because we all like something different. I tell my clients, it's like when you walk into a big store where they have 33 flavors of ice cream. That's like love. There's many flavors. You pick your flavor. This is the Diane flavor, the Be Love Principles flavor. But it's all love. Pick the flavor that you resonate with. What resonates with your soul to help with your growth and liberation. And by that, I mean liberation from our constricted ego views, because in my experience has been where my suffering came from. My preconceived notions, my reactions to things. And I'm not saying they're right or wrong. They were invitations. I can see now. They were invitations to growth and expansion.
One thing I love about principles is they're a reminder in a way, because the principles are rooted in universal truths that transcend cultural, temporal, situational contexts. They resonate with core values and align us with something much greater, whether it's our moral framework, our spiritual beliefs, or our innate sense of purpose. In a world that is constantly changing, principles act as anchors. They provide stability and clarity. And when we're faced with the unmarshaled turbulence and the uncertainty, they remind us of what truly matters and assist us or help us to act with alignment and authenticity, because they become the bridge. And I see this with the Be Love principles. They become the bridge between your beliefs and your actions, because it's a mechanism that translates what we embody and embrace and then enact and extend, so they can connect our inner values with our outer actions, which fosters coherence out of chaos and integrity into our lives, which becomes a catalyst for growth. If we consistently apply these principles, especially the Be Love principles, as you've alluded to, we grow, and growth is part of our heritage. And the challenge is to rise above the ego-driven reactions that help us to respond from a place of wisdom and love. Now, principle 2, which I love, see the divine essence in everyone and everything. Wow, that's a tough call. But it invites me to look beyond appearances and see the divine in all. How does seeing the divine essence in others change the way we see ourselves?
The more you practice these with yourself, the more you can see them in others. When we're talking about principle 2, see the divine essence, right, in everyone and everything. One of the things that really changed my perspective on all kinds of things was using the principles with events, organizations, situations. I was able to go past using them with individuals, which is always a great thing, or animals. I remember being out and seeing a snake And the snake was not in any way threatening me. The snake was just being a snake. I live in the woods. Snake was just being a snake. And I remembered, take a breath, see the divine essence. And I remember saying to myself, show me what I'm not seeing. And instead of what my mind had been programmed to be afraid of, I saw this magnificent creature that moved differently than I did, that had this glimmering, glistening, beautiful skin with these patterns. I mean, just like that, it changed my perspective. I saw a divine creature where 30 seconds before I was screaming like a 3-year-old for no reason. The snake wouldn't bother me. If anybody should have been afraid, it would have been the snake, not me. When you can be open to seeing that love is everywhere, and I mean in animals, bugs, us, whatever, you don't judge how it comes across. So there are all over the world, certainly in the United States, horrific fractions, political fractions, and fighting and infighting, and it's been very difficult to be a part of for everybody. I had to sit and ask one time, yeah, right, show me the divine essence here, because I don't get it. I'm not getting this at all. As I worked through the Be Loves as principles as a process, even when I was using it with that lady and her son that I explained before, I could shift. Even if I didn't have specifics, like this will lead to that. I didn't get anything like that when I was looking at political situations. But I could see and sense that there were divine beings, all of us divine beings, who sometimes were more ego identified, that literally were doing the best they could. They were doing what they thought was right. I didn't have to agree with it, but it shifted. I even had one meditation one time where I was using the principles where I saw this particular situation with people that I did not agree with. I saw them as babies, as toddlers, and I saw the essence of who they were. In a split second, I could see for some of them, some of the life situations that led them to where they were. What I also was able to understand, and this is all individual, it's just how they worked for me, was that if I am attached to what someone is or isn't, then I am missing so much of what a situation could unfold for me. If I am so laser focused on this is a bad situation, or even if this is a good situation, I am still not seeing the divine essence in it. And it could be so much more than even I thought it would be if we're talking about a joyous one. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes total sense. I wanted to talk about principle 3, and I know we could talk a lot more about each of these principles
Yep.
because they're simple, but they're also profound. And forgive quickly, completely, and unconditionally. Forgiveness, for me, is a cornerstone of spiritual growth, but it's also one of the most challenging things to do. What does it mean to forgive quickly, completely, and unconditionally? And how do we begin?
I have to say, my clients call it the other F word, right? Forgiveness. It's big. It's big. And everybody likes to be right. And I think once we understand, that was a really lovely thing you said about it being a cornerstone, right, of growth. Once you understand that energetically, the person who is being harmed by any resentment, regret, anything like that, it's you. You are holding that energy. And what I explain to my clients, if you think of us as a container of energy, and if this container, because of life experience, is holding on to, let's say, 30% of resentment, regret, all of that kind of protective energy, that's 30% less energy available I have for joy, peace, kindness, fun. So you're the one that's freed. Even having said that, it's a hard sell. I have come to believe that often forgiveness comes with a willingness to be open to forgiveness. There is a grace. When I think of a situation in my life that was, by anybody's standards, it would have been a horrific experience. And I can remember the tension that I always held anytime I thought about this particular situation, that I would get physically sick and have panic attacks. Once I was able to release, just the freedom that came from that, being able to sleep, being happier, being able to work with this situation without that kind of stress was tremendous. What I found as I bring people through that process of the principles is, if there's a situation like there was with me, I could bring this situation to mind and I could say, the situation that I'm in conflict with, how do I greet this with an open heart without an agenda and work with that? Show me the divine essence in this situation. Then by the time I got to principle 3, the grip had been loosened for me. And I did a meditation for a group one time. It was a mastermind group that I was invited to present the principles to. There was a pretty well-known energy worker in the group. What I had these folks do was identify a person or a situation. We called that their focus person or situation. And I had them assign 1 to 10. How much distress does this cause you? 10 being the worst. And they just wrote that down. They kept that to themselves. Then I had them use that focus person or event, and I walked them through the principles. When we got to principle 3 in this meditative experience, I said to them, you don't have to forgive anybody or anything. If you are even willing to know what it would feel like to forgive, let's ask about that. I led them through that. Then in the very end, the 4th principle, what I have people do, and I'll give your listeners full access to what I call the Be Love Bundle. It'll have meditations, it'll walk them through it. But I have them envision they are in this column of light. If they are willing, I have them bring the focus person or a symbol of whatever that focus situation is with them into the light. Not to justify anyone's actions at all, but just if they're willing, bring it into the light. Then I have them rate it again. How distressed are you by this person or event? Well, this one person that I'm talking about, this energy worker, had tears coming out of her eyes. And she said, you know, this thing that I focused on has bothered me for years. And I've done energy work on it. I've done belief work on it. I've prayed about it. This is the first time I could see the whole picture. And I could see not only what part I played, but I could see all the players, and I see it in a new light, and I feel completely different. She went from like a 10 distress down to like a 2 within 10 minutes. That's the power of love. Forgiveness to me is about a willingness to trust something beyond you. You know this. Often we will hold on to resentments because we feel it protects us. That person hurt me. I'm never going to trust them again. No, I've got to hold this up. When you are excluding consciously, you've got this barrier up. You exclude love too. You don't have to have anything to do with this person ever again. You and I know that many times people hold their deepest resentments toward people who've passed. They're not even here anymore. There's no time or space, really. So if somebody is still traumatized about something that literally happened 50 years ago and everybody else who's involved is dead, going through this forgiveness process in the now releases them. That's why you can say quickly, completely, and unconditionally, because the time thing, that's not a love thing, that's a human thing. Does that make sense?
Well, it's a powerful connection between forgiveness and freedom.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
How can someone forgive unconditionally without minimizing their pain or boundaries?
Well, I can give you the way it's worked for me and how I teach it, with the understanding that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist. What I have found is that you can hold someone responsible for an action. Like I said, if they need to have legal ramifications, go do that. But forgiveness helps you remember the divine essence of the person rather than the action. So you can separate the action, whatever that was, whatever that trauma was, separate from the divine essence of that person or thing that perpetuated it. So to me, that's what it is. So in the example I gave earlier of my grandson, right, or any kid, or a dog, you talked about a beloved family dog. Many people have pets that they absolutely adore that sometimes will chew up slippers. That doesn't mean that's who they are. That's the action they took in one moment. But that's not who that animal was. I will say some people will say to me, we all know of people who have patterns of behavior that seem unforgivable and unlovable. What I would say to them is everybody needs to connect to their own heart. I'm usually able to separate a pattern of behavior that's unacceptable from the essence of who that person is. Also, if I am unattached to the outcome, then I am allowing room for growth. I don't know what the overall purpose for some of these horrific things were. I don't know. I do know that from the deepest depths of sadness and despair can come and be birthed beautiful new chapters in people's lives. There's somebody that I know in our little hometown. She just had the son that everybody wanted, right? This kid was a football hero. He was brilliant. He was kind to everybody. We went to church with him at the time. Great kid. Freshman year of high school, coming home for Thanksgiving, he was killed in a senseless head-on accident by a drunk driver. Now, I watched my friend suffer. I watched her family suffer with that loss. I saw her organize Mothers Against Drunk Drivers here in our community. I saw decades of events that provided safe, supervised events for teenagers after prom. I have no idea how many lives that she saved and impacted, but I know out of that horrible tragedy, much good did come.
Mm. Incredible what can be birthed out of these situations. And I wonder sometimes if these situations present themselves to birth new ways of being and understanding and to promulgate this divine love. Maybe that's part of its way. Let's talk about principle 4, know you are divine love. That principle brings me back to the essence that we are divine love. How can we move from intellectually understanding this to fully embodying it and embracing it, and thereby extension enacting it in our lives?
This is a little mind trick, isn't it? Because I don't know what it was like where you grew up, but nobody said, "Oh, Diane, you're a divine light. Go shine in the world." No, that's not what I got growing up at all. One of the things that I offer my clients and students is their first thought is, I'm light. That's crazy. No, it's not. Everybody has one of these. I don't know how this thing works, but I know somehow I can push some little buttons on a screen. There's not even buttons there. And some beam of light goes to a satellite somewhere and bounces around. All of a sudden, I can call you or someone on the other side of the world. In mystical studies, light is knowledge. We are the light. We are the light of knowledge. So when we're Googling something on the phone, we're like, okay, well, I know there's a power higher than me, which is a program that I'm going to say, who was in this TV show in the 1970s, or what is this song I can't remember? I just think of this as Googling God, seeing this light within me, knowing that it is dynamic, loving, consistent, aligning with it in meditation. That was the first way that I could learn to embody the peace that you and I saw in that light in our near-death experience. It's eternal. It's hard for us, for example, to imagine never-ending space. I mean, as a human, it's hard to get our head around what does that really mean. I just remember being a little kid and going, well, space is like till here. Maybe space goes to here. We just can't comprehend it. Love is like that. And if we can even open the door to thinking, what if I am a divine spark? What if it's true? I could be here to live love. What would that look like? That starts a conversation. Some of us have had the experience, I know I have, where you are privileged and honored to be there when someone physically leaves their body. Now, in the situation I was in, we were gathered as a family around a loved one. It was pretty clear that the essence of who this person was there one moment, and then it was not there. That essence, whatever you think that is, if we believe energy can neither be created nor destroyed, that essence is eternal. And just opening your mind to the possibility, to me, is the first step toward connecting. Meditation for me is another one that really helps it land in my body. And moving from my head, which is the noisy place in there, I can imagine moving the energy from my head and my thoughts into my heart center. That's another thing that does that. There's a beautiful organization called the Heart Math Institute, and there's all kinds of fantastic breathing exercises that helps you connect to your heart. There's loads of science now that substantiates this. Isn't anything you and I are making up today. But I think the first part of it comes with that curiosity and that willingness. Sometimes I'll just say, show me. If I feel disconnected because there's been something going on in my life, I'll just shut my eyes, put my hand on my heart, and just say, show me. Show me what it feels like to be connected. I've forgotten. I've just forgotten. Just show me. Show me what it feels like. Help me feel that. That's one of the ways that I use.
What's the role of cultivating patience and self compassion in this process?
The way I've experienced it and the way I teach it is if you believe, as I do, as you do, that we are, whatever term you want to, we're creator, we're children of God, whatever that term is for you, we're all connected and we've got that divine spark. Why would you treat the divine within you worse than you would any of your friends or family? Why wouldn't you love that divine as much as you love your kids, your animals, your pets, your whatever your passion is? There is, in some culture, certainly in mine, growing up in the 60s, there was this, you put everybody else first, you're the mom, you're the daughter, whatever it is, sacrifice you. I'm not saying that was wrong, I'm just saying that's the way that was. The more we understand, it's not smart to sacrifice ourselves. If we sacrifice our feelings, our wants, now, yeah, we're going to compromise. We want to be collaborative and loving, right? If we're coming from our heart instead of our ego, we're not in a selfish perspective anyway. We are simply standing in our truth and asking for what we need, collaborating like you and I are doing right now, contributing, whatever that looks like. But this is not, your own divinity is not to be dismissed or disrespected. It is in the body that you have, living the life that you have. It is every bit as sacred as anybody on the planet. You don't have to be a monk sitting cross-legged in the Himalayas somewhere to have a more sacred life. Your life is sacred. It's sacred. And you are here right now because you're needed here right now at this very second, or you just wouldn't be here. That's all there is to it. You wouldn't. Your voice, your love, your vision, your talents, your human perspective, hopefully grounded in that loving identity, it's needed now. So we all can come together and create the collaborative, respectful, loving life that we not only want to live, but that world we can live to next generations. That's why we're here.
That's a powerful message. This conversation, this dialogue has been a journey from your story, your personal story, to the profound wisdom of the Be Love principles. And you've given us some tools and stories and inspiration to shift from ego driven fear to divine love. And it's clear that these principles offer a path to greater connection and healing and peace. Before we wrap up, Diane, what's your vision for how these principles can shape the world?
My vision is always around helping people find peace, love, compassion within themselves, and letting that move out into their lives with their families, their communities in any way that they see fit. My passion is to share these on beautiful podcasts like this, from the stage, in classes, mentoring people, and my YouTube videos. This is the flavor of love that's coming through me. And if the Be Love principles, or any single one of them, can help people find and connect more clearly to that inner peace and calm and joy, man, it doesn't get any better than that. It doesn't get any better than that to me. You can see it's my joy to do this.
Can certainly feel that from you. I want to thank you for sharing your heart, your wisdom, and your vision with us today. On behalf of everyone listening, we are extremely grateful for your work and the light you bring to the world. Where can people find you? And do you have a final piece of advice for people who want to explore the Be Love principles?
Well, thank you. Thank you. And everyone, we're all on our own sacred path. This is just what mine looks like. I believe we come from love, in love, to live love. And whether that is tending to your garden, feeding your family, hosting a podcast, coaching, whatever it is, you can bring even more love to what you're doing from the divine love perspective, that real fuel of joy. That to me is wonderful. If people would love to explore more about the Be Love principles, I will give you a link so people can get a special gift. It's called beloveprinciples.org is my main website, and that gives you all kinds of free meditations. There's even coloring sheets in there. I actually have little videos to help people through the process for each of those. I have a site called morefromdiane.com, and that's where my events are and some other free gifts. If anybody is interested in learning more about it, it just would be my honor to share these with you. And thank you so much for the work you do and for the wonderful conversations that we have. I love talking to you.
Oh, feelings mutual, Diane. It's important to remember that love is not just a feeling, it's a practice, it's a choice, it's a pathway. It's where we move from pathology to process. For me, it's important to take the small steps into a bigger world towards living the Be Love principles in my daily life. I want to thank you from my heart for all your wisdom, your insights, and your journey. Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I love you. I love this platform. It is so much fun to love people, places, and things. It brings a whole new emphasis to everything. So I send you love, everyone here love, and we'll be on this human adventure together, ups and downs.
Mm.